talk about where we came from before we move in. This is the third session that we've been talking about Kabbalah. Um, I don't know why it seems to be glitching a little bit, at least on the screen, but maybe when I share stuff, it won't be as glitchy. Um, so let me just put something else up here for right now. Um, so um, yeah, when we when we've talked about stuff over the last few weeks, we've had a chance to kind of review and go over some really important parts of the system of Kabbalah. And I would really say, kind of again, from the standpoint of, let me let people in. Um, we've kind of gone through a historic overview, and today, again, the theme is really to talk about how it plays out in the modern world. How do we experience Kabbalah? How are things done? Um, that you would see how Kabbalah manifests today. So we're going to talk about that too, but let's review a little bit and actually you um Esther had a question about one of the things that we discussed last. But before we start, and because we have the Schulmans on, I want to just tell you something that they shared with me that's really, really cool. I actually um, ordered this book that just should be coming today for me. They sent me a great article about this new book, which I'd heard was coming out, and I guess I missed it when it came out. It was during the holidays, around the holidays. This is a book called The Jewish Roots of American Liberty. And again, thank you, Schulman's, for sharing this with me. And my copy should be here today. It says, I think it said it was coming Wednesday. So this is a book that kind of goes through the what we talk about a lot. And we talked about a lot when we were reading the Torah, especially looking at Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory, the former chief rabbi of Britain, talked a lot about how important the Torah was for the founding fathers. And even before the founding fathers, the pilgrims and some of the people whose philosophies were the underpinnings of democracy, Western democracy, and especially American democracy. People like John Milton, Nathaniel Hawthorne, but again, all the way up through some of the important founders of the United States, including again some of our presidents and some of our great thinkers, Thomas Jefferson, who was a deist, who actually was very strong in his belief that most religious systems were kind of had gone off base. But again, this book, The Jewish Roots of American Liberty, I haven't read it yet. I can't recommend it completely yet because I haven't read it, but I will in days. And thank you, Schulman's, for letting me know that it was out so that we can share it with everybody else. Um, so that's a little not on the subject of Kabbalah at all, but one thing I wanted to let everybody know is out there. But to review and to talk about some of the things that have got us to this point, as I talked about the last couple of weeks, we talked about some of the Kabbalistic systems. We talked about some of the ideas that are the basic teachings of the main texts, whether it's the Zohar or some of the other Kabbalistic texts. And we talked about some of those texts, Sefer Yetzirah. On the screen right now, you can see the map of the Sfirot, the Lurianic Kabbalah. One of the things that we talked about was how important Luria's Kabbalah system was. We also talked about and we had a chance to look at some of the other kind of really important um, the other important parts of Kabbalistic teachings, including this idea of the four worlds, of what we call the four dimensions or four levels of existence. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, with Asiya being the dimension that we come into contact the most, the physical dimension, the dimension we essentially where actions and where we see everything happening, where we kind of spend most of our time, if you will. But these dimensions all exist simultaneously. So we talked about that, but we really talked last week about the Sphirot and about the Lurianic system. Again, the map that I had out before, which is this. um, the Sphirot. But we remember we talked about the fact that the concept of in Lurianic Kabbalah was that God contracted, did something what's called Tzimtzum, contracts, and that allows for space to be created. And for those original the original creation, what the kalim, these vessels that contained God's energy, the light of God's energy, couldn't contain it, and they exploded, creating the physical world, creating those shells, those pieces that we have to rescue and repair, what we call tikkun olam. And so we talked about that. We shared some of the texts, and I am going to put these up today. All of the texts and all these things that we are looking at right now, I'm going to put up. But we had this, some of these texts from the Zohar and some of these texts from Eitz Chaim, which are Luria's sayings that were collected by his student Chaim Vital. That again, this breaking is now being put back together in the Sphirot, in the map of the Sphirot, that that those Sphirot, those 10 emanations, those contain God's energy more effectively. They allow the energy to move through our world and really through our worlds, through our dimensions, because those Sphirot are on every dimension. Those are the channels and those are the pathways for that energy to go. And so we work with those as kind of the vessels, the way the vessels should have been in the first place. Those Sphirot should have been there at the beginning, and now they allow for God's energy to kind of exist in a balance. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that every single person has parts of those shells. Every individual contains within them and has access to certain pieces. And again, we shared that poem that we'll also post up from Lawrence Kushner, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, who talked about each person having a piece of a jigsaw puzzle that they present and that they help assemble. That led to then the discussion that some Kabbalistic teachings are that if we don't fix that piece, if you will, if we don't complete that work in this world, we come back into what's called a Gilgul, another incarnation. We come back maybe again, or maybe again we come in for part of someone else's existence and then allow them to kind of do the work. That's the concept of a Dybbuk. But the concept of a soul being reincarnated led to Esther's question that she wanted me to discuss, which is if there's only a finite number of souls, which is one of these teachings that there is this soul repository, how can people how can there continue to be 7 billion and now 8 billion people? How does the population expand? And the idea is that there is a finite number. And once those lives have been able to live, and once everyone's done their work, once the restoration is complete, then there will be no more souls. Then the system of creation essentially runs its course and everything gets fixed and there are no new people. We essentially enter into the messianic era. And this messianism of Kabbalah, the messianism of Kabbalah is really a sense of restoration. It's almost the exact opposite of the apocalypse, in that the apocalypse kind of is that everything's going to break and then it's all over. Like the world is over. Judaism actually says that the world was broken at the beginning and that we're fixing it up so that eventually it's complete, and that like we don't have to go through this system anymore. The system is now balanced and everything is okay. And so it's an interesting idea of completion, so that like at that point the upper and lower worlds, all worlds are united, and then there's no more death, there's no more all of the other things we talk about in the messianic era, but it's just everything is at a balance, so there's no need for birth and death and all of those kinds of things, because everything is even, everything is now completely in balance. In the meantime, we're living in this broken world that we try to heal. So, we there's definitely Kabbalistic teachings that were, and then we talked about some of the Hasidic beliefs that we're in that era. I mean, for the not all, but for the Chabad Hasidim, for the Lubavitchers who believe that the Rebbe was the Messiah, and I was going to get to this today, and I'll get to it now. Hasidic Judaism is the most Kabbalistic part of, like, when we experience Kabbalah, how Kabbalah works in today's world. Hasidism is there, and I'm going to get to a teaching when we finish. That's a really important Hasidic teaching from actually Chabad, the first Chabad Rebbe, Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who wrote a book called the Tanya, and I'm going to share with you a teaching from the Tanya. And so Hasidism really kept alive the Kabbalistic teachings. It really had this, and that's why this saying from the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of all Hasidic movements, all of them come out of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. He basically said, again, a small act done with a full heart repairs worlds. And Hasidism really taught that everything we do, eating, drinking, everything should be done with joy, and everything should be done with energy, with the intention of knowing that our energy is fixing the world. And of course, I'm going to get to the what about the bad stuff. We are going to get to that, but I want to talk about that, and I'll get to Hasidism. But first, I want to step back. Well, first of all, are there any questions about what I just reviewed? Because that was a 5-10 minute review, but it's a lot of ideas that have gotten us to today. And I hope that today, what I'll do is, like I said, I'm going to post everything up with some links for our these discussions will all be linked up, but also some other teachings and really good some really good video explanations. Any questions? Any
Just
questions?
one,
Yes.
just a confirmation of what you were saying about my question. So are you saying that um, the population can keep expanding because the finite number of souls hasn't been reached?
Hasn't been reached yet.
Okay,
When it gets reached, when it
got it.
gets reached, then then this stops. This cycle
Okay.
will be done. So it will get done. So uh yeah, we don't know how close we are to that, but there are people who believe that we're very close to that already, meaning this cycle will be done soon. And some people say it's like a 6,000 year cycle. And the 6,000 years, if we're in year 5786 right now, if it's 6,000 years, that means we're about 200 years or so from the cycle finishing up. Means it's probably not going to happen in our lifetime, but it's not far away. We can feel it. Like, we can feel that maybe we're reaching that. And there definitely are things that kind of lead us to thinking maybe we are close. I mean, as close as we are to destruction and ultimate destruction, which we're obviously have since the 50s have had the capability to completely destroy the world, maybe we also have the power to really fix the world. Like, you can't have one without the other. So there, there's hope, and even as we get closer to like the scary stuff, we're also maybe closer to the really good stuff. But I want to talk about one of the ways that Kabbalah manifests today. Any other questions? Sorry. I mean, if so, Esther, I hope that helped explain it
Yes,
a little bit,
that does.
because I know a lot of this kind of is takes a while to soak in, and that's actually exactly what I want to talk about now, because one of the centers of Kabbalistic teachings is in our backyard, the Kabbalah Center, and it's become very big over the last 40 years. It was really started, about 40, 50 years ago by the Berg family, Philip Berg, and then his wife Karen continued it. It's become a worldwide, they have worldwide offices, and it really, in a lot of ways, became almost a Jewish cult. I'm not going to say it's a Jewish cult, it's not, but there definitely are culty kind of elements to it. And let me explain why. Now, the mission statement of the Kabbalah Center, which again is located in West LA, is to make Kabbalah accessible to everybody, to make sure that everybody could have access to this knowledge that's been kind of hidden, as we talked about, because you weren't even supposed to study it if you were a Jewish male until you were 40. So there was a sense that this was kind of inaccessible even to our own people, because it was so potentially not only difficult to understand, but could be potentially dangerous. It could be mind blowing. So you got to be careful with it. What was interesting is when the Kabbalah Center started in LA and again expanded to other places like London, uh, all around the world, actually, they really were able to have a huge boost through the celebrity of what happened here in Los Angeles because several celebrities got very involved with it. The biggest celebrity who got involved with it was Madonna, but she didn't just get involved in it, she got super involved and still is super involved in it. And it's been a long time now, and I'm going to explain to you how deep this levels. I already played you the song, the Ray of Light song that she wrote, which was influenced by her Kabbalistic studies. But this is a woman who's been very devoted to it. Now she grew up Catholic. She says she's never stopped being, if not Catholic, but she's never said she's Jewish. She does have a Hebrew name. She goes by Esther, and she speaks Hebrew. She also has studied not just Kabbalistic texts, the Zohar, but she's also studied many other texts, and she was very passionate about getting other people involved in it, including her ex-husband, Guy Ritchie, who she got very involved with it. He actually did a movie called Revolver, which was not one of his big movies. It didn't do very well, but it's very Kabbalistic. It's actually probably too Kabbalistic. He made it such a parable of Kabbalah that it actually was almost impossible to understand. If you know Kabbalah a little bit, it gets a little bit more entertaining, but it didn't do well because it was almost like a too philosophical of a movie. And it wasn't, it was still packaged as an action movie, as a like almost all of his movies about crime. Guy Ritchie, came out of the gate doing, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch. He did his movies even today, gentlemen, are all about the London underworld and London crime, and he loves doing movies about that. That's his genre. But this Revolver was a Kabbalistic treatment of that. Again, didn't do very well, but very Kabbalistic. But Madonna didn't just get him involved, but also got Demi Moore involved, Ashton Kutcher when she was with him, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan. There was a time in the early 2000s when everybody was getting involved with this. Paris Hilton, um, Alex Rodriguez, Mick Jagger. I mean, these were all people who were not Jewish at all. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow got pretty involved in it for a while, but she's actually Jewish. But there were a lot of people who had no Jewish connection, no Jewish ancestry, who got involved with the Kabbalah Center. And really, what they were teaching was kind of a simplified Lurianic Kabbalah, the stuff that we talked about last time, about the Sfirot, about the Tikkun that we all have to do. But they really didn't want to have people have a barrier of understanding Hebrew to accept to access this. They told people they don't have to become kosher. They don't have to do Jewish rituals in order to understand and practice this and have this shape their lives. So it was very different from traditional Kabbalistic teachings before, which basically said you have to do all this other stuff and then you can start learning about Kabbalah. So they took all of that away. It's a major break from the way we normally study. And they really brought in a lot of kind of the talk, the kind of the Marianne Williamson, a lot of the kind of new agey talk about removing negativity and healing and a lot of spiritual force, a lot of stuff that was kind of new age stuff, but there was a basis for it in some of the Kabbalistic stuff that I've shared with you, especially these ideas of the Kav and the energy in the Sfirot. I mean, so it was already like there was stuff there, but this idea of talking about balance and alignment, all part of Kabbalah, but they were basically saying there's this ancient system that we're going to show you that's been teaching this for thousands of years. But you don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to follow any of the rituals. Now, of course, what do you do? Because you got to do something. Well, part of the problem was you had to pay. You had to pay for things. So one of the things that they were selling and still sell is a red string, a red ribbon that you put around your hand, which is protection. It's segula. It's an amulet. Now, this was not a major thing in Jewish history. It's not like everybody knew about the red ribbon, but they've turned it into a major thing that you got to get this red ribbon. It's going to protect you, and it's going to help you be in balance. Now, the red ribbon, I mean, look, if you're going to sell somebody, an amulet for 20 bucks, 30 bucks, okay, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, by the way, this mezuzah is not an amulet. That has a scroll inside of it. It's my Dodgers one. I'm giving this one to
I
I'm giving
love
this
it.
one to I'm giving this one to Kyle Tucker when he comes. But it has a scroll in it, right? But look, I mean, people do feel it protects our homes. There are people who say, you should make sure your mezuzah scroll is in good shape. And there's sometimes people get, a little bit amulety about it, I would say. It becomes a little bit of a protection. But what's amazing is that the Kabbalah Center, well, I'm going to show you some of the things that they sell. And this is on the website today. So I just want you to understand this is not like, hey, this is something that they did 20, 30 years ago. This is stuff that's happening right now, that's happening at this moment. Okay, so I'm going to share with you um, this. Let me just get to this screen. I got too many screens. That's the problem. I'm screening all over the place. Now I'm going to show you this. So this is a book that you can have, which is the Zohar. Now the new Zohar that they're selling to people has a country flag on it. I don't know where this comes from exactly, but I'm going to tell you where I think it comes from. I think it comes from people who sell Bible books and they put flags on the Bible books. That's where I think it comes from. I think it comes from what churches and what some other organizations sell to people as a gimmick. Now, this is $100. I mean, this is real money. I mean, again, it's a book and maybe it's worth $100, but I want to tell you this is a book that's entirely in Aramaic. It's the Zohar. We talked about it. It's the fundamental text of Kabbalah. It was written in the 12th century. Some people traditionally said it was written 2,000 years ago. They're going to say it was written 2,000 years ago, but I want you to read what they say when they sell this book. The Zohar is the authoritative text of ancient Kabbalah and one of the most powerful of all Kabbalistic spiritual tools. Its teachings transcend religion, race, and politics. Then why are you putting the flag on it, by the way? But whatever. It's everybody, right? For the first time, you can get the original ancient Aramaic text of the Zohar is now available in a single volume with a country's flag. Now, here's the key part, folks. By reading passages in the Zohar, even if we do not understand them, or scanning or meditating on the letters, we can open up a channel to the light of the Creator, thus awakening positive spiritual forces. Somebody's got some noise there. Somebody's not muted. It's coming from the side. It's okay. Thus awakening positive spiritual forces that can combat negativity. Just having the Zohar in our possession can awaken our consciousness and ignite the light of peace, protection, connection, and transformation in our life. That is turning a book into an amulet, is it not? I'm holding it right now. I'm holding it right now. The energy is flowing through me right now. This book is in Aramaic. There is not one line of English in this book. This book is sold with that intention right there. That putting this under your pillow, there's not one line of Hebrew, of translation. It's all in Aramaic. It's all in Hebrew letters. That doing this is going to heal you. That's not Judaism, folks.
That's marketing.
That's marketing and it's witchcraft. That is insane. But they've been super successful for years at doing this. And it's had a huge effect, and some would say a super positive effect on some of the people that have been involved with it. So look, I'm going to be real careful when I say, what my judgment is on this. So this is This is Madonna's tattoo on her arm.
You kidding?
This is the tattoo that she used to have, by the way. Was a temporary tattoo. This was from the movie when she was doing the movie that she was in, the James Bond movie that she was in, um, Die Another Day. She had this tattooed on her arm. Does everyone see that? It was not a it was a temporary tattoo. Lamed Aleph Vav, which is not a it's not a word. It's one of the Kabbalistic names for God of a permutation of three letters. So she had that temporarily tattooed on her, but it was not a permanent tattoo. I thought it was a permanent tattoo. It was not. That was something that the Kabbalah Center was encouraging people to do. Take three letters. These three letters will be your letters, like your mantra. Remember how they used to do mantras? These three letters are your mantra. They will protect you and they will guide you. Even if you didn't understand Hebrew, you got three letters. So these were her three letters, Lamed, Aleph, and Vav. She ended up getting a tattoo, folks, of the Kabbalistic tree. That's her arm. Does everyone see that?
Yep.
That's that, folks. That's the Sfirot on her arm. Above it, she has the word Vaish, right here in Hebrew, Vaishakahu, which means and he kissed. It's a line from Genesis of when Jacob kisses Esau. Now, it obviously has something to do with some text that she read in the Kabbalah. This, by the way, these are the letters for her kid's name: Lords, Rocco, whatever. These are her six children. These are their initials. And guess what's there, folks? Look what's there. There's her red ribbon. So this is real for a lot of people that have studied Kabbalah. Okay, this is for her given her some sense of peace. This has given her, um, you know, she's had difficulties in her life. She's talked about them. This has given her stability. So I'm careful in my judgment again overall on Kabbalah. I want to show you one other thing though. This was kind of pretty weird when I saw it. So I'm gonna show you this right now. This is a video. This is her ex-husband, Guy Ritchie. So I told you need a Kabbalah movie, Revolver, that was not a Kabbalah movie unless you knew it was a Kabbalah movie. But this is when he's hyping the movie, the live action movie Aladdin, which he directed. This was in 2019. Now, this is 11 years after they got divorced. Listen to this, folks, because this is going to blow some of your minds.
כן, אבל האישה שלי היא לדברת עברית. So ככה, אנחנו, לפני עם ילדים שלי, אנחנו לדבר בעברית. עם שפה קשה, אבל שפה סוד. So ככה הם לא מבינים שום דבר.
אתה תלמד אותם עברית?
Okay, did you know that Guy Ritchie spoke better Hebrew than most of you? Now, he's not speaking great Hebrew, okay? But 11 years after he's divorced from this woman, he's still speaking Hebrew. And what he just said is, I learned Hebrew from a teacher in Haifa. And he said, I spoke Hebrew so I could speak to the kids because the kids spoke Hebrew. Which means Madonna and her children were speaking Hebrew at home. And Guy Ritchie wanted to speak with the kids in Hebrew. So look, a lot of this came about because of the Celebrity Center issue. You know, that people wanted to be around these celebrities. The celebrities gave it their presence. Everybody wanted to be around these celebrities. Everyone wanted to do what they were doing. But again, it's Jewish teachings without Judaism. Can you do it? Does it perpetuate? Now, the Kabbalah Center does have Shabbat services. There are people who go to Kabbalah Center to do Jewish things, but they were also doing this kind of, marketing that they made millions, hundreds of millions of dollars through the celebrity uh, through the success of having these celebrities being involved. Again, instead of being text based, it was basically this is how you feel. This is kind of, and again, I don't know a lot about Scientology, but I'll say there was a little bit of Scientology style to this. Instead of doing mitzvot, you don't have to do anything Jewish. Instead of like learning this for many, many years, hey, here's a book, lay on the book. Just put it under your head and it'll work. And again, it really kind of demeans kind of what the bigger issues of Kabbalah are, which are, again, in Kabbalah, we're talking about repairing the universe. How are we God's partner in repairing the universe? How are we actually helping God? Because to some extent, if these pieces are broken, God's broken, and we've got to help fix it. Human beings have a really important role to play in fixing it. So, I mean, you can say whatever you want about like, the Kabbalah and this teaching and energy, but at the end of the day, it's about doing stuff. And so, instead of like self-help, the Kabbalah is really important. Now, that being said, I have, look, at least people were being exposed to Jewish ideas that are really important. And um, I got to tell you something. Guy Ritchie speaking Hebrew, we live in a world where celebrities carry a lot of weight when it comes to politics and when it comes to things that maybe they shouldn't have to weigh on. But Madonna, finally kind of came out and started saying some stuff that was a little kind of anti-Israel towards the end of the war. But for the most part, I mean, you had somebody who probably, if she wasn't so steeped in Jewish learning and speaking Hebrew and going to Israel, I don't even know how many. She's been to Israel maybe 100 times. She had a place in Israel. I mean, I don't know how many times she's been to Israel, but she's been to Israel more than 99% of the Jews that I know. It's going to have an effect on their politics and on their statements about Israel and about Judaism. And that's not bad. So again, I don't want to say it's all negative because I think there are some positive approaches. And at the end of the day, if Madonna led a better life because of her attachment to this, I don't know, maybe. So I'm a little careful of saying it, but it definitely is a little culty. It definitely triggers things in me that kind of like, oh, even Judaism can be turned into a cult. So it's problematic, but it's not. You can't just dismiss it and say it's all bad. And so that's why you gotta be careful in your judgment. And like I said, I have people that I know that have been involved with it. I always warn them. I said, look, if you start to feel like you're, paying for stuff and there's an economic imperative, be careful. Any questions about Kabbalah Center?
Does the red ribbon do the same thing as warding off the evil eye? My mother used to put a red ribbon on things and
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
okay.
that's where it comes from. But for in the Kabbalah Center, it's not just negative. It's not just that it keeps negativity away from you, like Kanahora, right? No evil eye.
Right.
But it's also helps balance your energy, right? And
Mhm.
so a lot of it's not just about like the outside, but also about you inside having this balance, so that you're in a balance. So it's a lot of it. Any Any questions or comments about Kabbalah Center? I hope that was somewhat clear, and I hope look, it's a very important part of when you were talking about Kabbalah today. If I didn't address it, I'd be doing a disservice to all of us because you just can't ignore it. I mean, it's ridiculous to talk about Kabbalah without talking about the Kabbalah Center. It's just impossible. Again, even if it's not teaching traditional Kabbalah, it's doing something and it's using Kabbalah, and you can't ignore it. So that's why we spent a little bit of time talking about it, and yeah, I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to see what's going on here. So, as I mentioned, one of the ways that the Kabbalistic teachings are disseminated And interestingly, a lot less maybe than they would have been if certain historical things hadn't happened. But Hasidic Judaism is a very, very Kabbalistic um, framework I mean, it's everywhere in Hasidic Judaism. The interesting thing is the way that history has played out. Since most Orthodox Judaism that we come in contact with today is Hasidic Judaism, we don't really know what happened. And I told you before, Hasidic Judaism used to be it used to be considered aberrant behavior, aberrant Jewish behavior. So much so that Hasidic rabbis used to be declared heretics and excommunicated from the organized Jewish community. What we called the mitnagdim, which are the opponents, because we use the Hasidic language for them, the Jews who opposed the Hasidic movements and said they were not very halachic. Just like the Kabbalah Center, they said about these people, you're not very Jewish. You're not praying enough. You're not studying enough. Definitely not studying enough. And you're telling people that when they chop wood, that they're doing something that is bringing about redemption. If they do the Kavanah, if they do it with joy, if they do it understanding that what they're doing is helping to do tikkun. And there were Jewish institutions that were saying that's not Judaism. And Kabbalah is not like shouldn't be everywhere. It's not like the Mitnagdim didn't understand Kabbalah and didn't have a place for it, but they didn't want it front and center, and they definitely didn't want people to incorporate these kind of ideas into on a very simple level, basically telling people it doesn't matter so much what you're studying. And so that changed once most of the world was no longer today. Most of the world was not Orthodox anymore, and the Mitnagdim fell so far out of power that the Hasidic Jews were the majority of the Orthodox Judaism. They actually now appear, Hasidic Jews appear as Orthodox in practice, when actually at one point they were the Reformed Jews, if you will. I don't like to use that analogy because it makes, it kind of demeans Reformed Judaism, or it demeans what, I mean, you got to be careful with those kind of terms and how you mean them. But this idea that you guys are not really doing the real stuff is what Hasidic Judaism was at one point. And what's ironic is that they are now the flagpole, they're the tent bearer, whatever the terms you want to use for the flag bearers of Orthodox Judaism today. So that's kind of weird. But they really did develop these ideas from the Baal Shem Tov, from the first Hasidic teacher, the first Hasidic Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov. They started focusing on some of these teachings about tikkun and about this energy that we have the potential of elevating, these concepts from Lurianic Kabbalah. So one of the early heads of the Hasidic movement, one of the dynasties, is the founder of the Lubavitcher Hasidim, Chabad. And Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe as they called him, he had some very important teachings. And I'm going to share with you one of the teachings in a song. But this is a really important concept that exists it actually goes back to the Torah and back to the Talmud and some of our earliest teachings, which is that we have both a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara, right? We have a good inclination and we have an evil inclination. But we have to keep them, we have to have both. We can't exist without both. But we have to be really careful because the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, wants to be fed. It wants to be nurtured, just like we have to nurture the good one. So we're controlling both, and I'm going to let my friend Saul K. Sing you his song about this. This is called Two Wolves, and he's really a great guitar player. If you come to Israel with us in November, Saul and Alana, his wife Alana, will be with us. Now, Saul is a one of the founders of the Jewish Roots movement. He's a blues and one of the influences that he was doing this before Joe Buchanan. He produced Joe's early albums and has worked with him. And this is from the video that we shot, the Shabbat we shot in Texas with him. And I'm going to play some of this song called Two Wolves. He's going to explain it. And again, he'll be in Israel with us in November. And when we go to Sfat with him, he's going to introduce us to some of his Kabbalistic teachers that he's worked with. And again, unlike Joe, Saul's been steeped in Jewish teachings for a long time. The interesting thing about Joe is he's a recent convert and has got a lot of energy and a lot of, I think, important words to say from someone who's coming from a very American style and a very American background. Whereas Saul's a little bit more he didn't grow up Orthodox, but he did grow up in kind of a more traditional Jewish environment and has spent a lot of time in Israel and spent a lot of time learning Hasidic Judaism. So he's in rabbinical school now. He's studying to be a rabbi, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about this teaching on what are called the two wolves. And let me share this and let me make sure the music is playing here too. Okay.
The song is called Two Wolves, and it's a story that actually comes from the Tanya, which is written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Lee. And he talks about a couple different types of people in the world. Ones that are, they talk about the tzaddikim, the righteous ones, the Benoni, people in between, and the Rashas, the people that are only doing the wrong things. And essentially, we have two forces that exist within us. We have the Yetzer HaTov, which is a good inclination, and we have the Yetzer Hara. And in the American Indian folklore tradition, they talk about something very similar, which is that we all have two wolves within us. There is the good wolf and there's the bad wolf. And the one that grows is the one that you feed. So this one's called Two Wolves. There are two wolves inside of me. Said one tries to tell me and the other one believes. There are two wolves up inside of me. So be careful now, cause you're in trouble. Said me, the good wolf, Yetzer HaTov. He's faithful and obeys. You know he's always so well behaved. You can bet your last dollar that he will never stray. Sometimes I wake up so hungry. Said I can't eat, I can't sleep, you know the it's got me up all night. Now my eyes are red and closed. There are two wolves inside of me. So one tries to tell me and the other one believes. There are two wolves up inside of me. So be careful now, cause you never know which one you'll lead.
So it's a wonderful way to kind of reflect on this teaching that we have a Yetzer HaTov, we have a Yetzer Hara, we have these inclinations. We need both of them. We can't survive without both. But of course, it gets a little dangerous because if we feed the Yetzer Hara more than we're feeding the Yetzer HaTov, we're going to go off the deep end. And so it's the energy that we're putting into feeding those wolves that kind of directs our lives and gives us, again, those behaviors and those things that and for most of us who are Benoni, we're not tzaddikim and we're not Rasha, we're not good necessarily or all bad, but the people in between always have these two wolves that are inside of them and that are and again, if you're a tzaddik, if you're elevated so much, you don't need that. But The Yetzer Hara we actually need because if we don't have it, then we can't function. We don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to make money. We don't want to do any of the things that we need to do in order to get through this world, in order to be in this world. But again, there's a difference between understanding it and trying to kill it, but at the same time, feeding it and taking such good care of it and nurturing it so that it becomes the wolf that's dominant within us. So again, the interesting thing is that he tied it again to the two wolves in Native American teachings as well. So it's something I think everyone can relate to. It's a very important, again, teaching within the Tanya, within this, within the Kabbalistic texts of the original Chabad Rebbe, and so it's a little teaching. It's a little bit. Again, you could say, well, what's really Kabbalistic about it? What's really the Kabbalah in there? There are levels to the teaching where when you see it, you realize, oh yeah, they're not just talking about good and bad and having that energy, but it's really about feeding that energy. It's about what you're doing to put those pieces of energy together towards that more destructive part of us because we can. I mean, we can channel that energy, if we will, into stuff that's not productive. Our money, our energy, our time into things that are destructive, both to ourselves and to other people. So it's a really important teaching and one that I'm going to show you another place where we see Kabbalah, which we've talked about before, and that's in our prayers. That's in our prayers. And I said no prayer is really as Kabbalistic as Lachadodi. Now, we only do a few of the verses of Lachadodi. The actual text of Lachadodi is right here in Hebrew, and there's the transliteration, and down here is the translation. So we do the first two verses, the Shin and the Lamed, and then the last one is Boi Kala, or Boi V'Shalom. Sorry. Um, Now, if you do all the verses, what's interesting is that Shin, Lamed, Mem, Hey, Lamed, Vav, Yud. If you look at the verses of the prayer, the 8 verses that make up the bulk of the text, not the Boi V'Shalom, which was added, but as kind of a refrain, but the 8 verses actually spell out the author of the prayer, Shlomo Halevi. His last name was Alkabetz, but Shlomo Halevi, and there's the Ha-Levi, Hey, Lamed, Vav, Yud. There's the Shlomo, Shin, Lamed, Mem, Hey. This is a very Kabbalistic thing, which is to put codes and to put little messages into texts so that you have to be careful. You have to read them carefully to see everything. Because again, it's kind of teaching people to try to see behind everything. So this is the code, if you will, to the song, and this happens in a lot of Kabbalistic texts. They'll incorporate words and names that are there in both gematria and then ways that the numbers, the number equivalents to the letters add up, like Chai being 18, to things like putting their names into the texts. But it's very cool because again, we don't have usually the knowledge of who wrote a prayer. We know who wrote this one, and you don't sign the prayer, if you will, but he put his name into it. But what's interesting about how Kabbalistic this is, and I'll show you in the translation. The Hebrew begins with a text about Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, which means observe and remember in a single command the one God announced to us. The Lord is one and his name is one, for fame, for glory, for praise. God's name is the greatest. And observe and remember, Shamor v'Zachor, means in the 2 places in the Torah where it talks about Shabbat, in the 10 Commandments, in one place it says Shamor, and in the other place it says Zachor. So why are those differences in Exodus and Deuteronomy? The reason is God said them together at the same time. The word Shamor, Zachor came out, and people heard it. Some people heard Shamor and some people heard Zachor, but it happened at the same time. That's a way to explain a scribal change in the 10 Commandments without giving it well, there are two different authors who copied it, who gave it to us. Again, the difference between observe and remember maybe isn't significant, but they're saying they're both important and they're both there. Shlomo Levi isn't the person who invented that. That's already in the Talmud, a discussion about why is there two different words for it. But that's not really the Kabbalistic part. The Kabbalistic part is right at the beginning. Come, my friend, to meet the bride. Let us welcome Shabbat. Now, why is Shabbat called a bride? Because it's the feminine form of God. It's the Shekhinah. And not only is the word for God there, the Kala, that God is the Kala, that we're actually going through every Shabbat a wedding, a marriage with God. We as the people of Israel, as the in this case the male side, with the feminine side of God, with being the bride. And when we say in the second verse right here, it says, um, we say, um, oh no, let's say just in the first verse right here. Um, I wanted to show you this, where it says L'Shem U'Tiferet, L'Shem U'Tiferet, for God's Tiferet. Remember, this is one of the spots on the Kabbalistic tree where God and where where justice and compassion meet on the Kabbalistic on the Sefirot. Let me just I'm gonna put it up real quick one more time. That that in that place where the energy, divine energy meets, you have Tiferet. And so there you actually have a reference to the concept of the divine balance of male and female of energy, that on Shabbat this all comes together. And of course, people were encouraged to have sex on Shabbat because that divine energy is enhanced by people doing that. And there it is right there. See, in the center of the Kabbalistic structure is Tiferet. And this is where the male and female sides of God come together. The Keter, or the crown of God, with the Malchut and the Shekhinah, the divine feminine. So this comes together along those lines. And by the way, in the middle between Tiferet and Shekhinah is the phallus. So if the Tiferet is the heart, where the balance is happening with our minds and with our soul, the Yesod is where our physical body is also being involved in literally the center of procreation. Because on a map of a woman, that's exactly where the divine feminine and the human feminine meet. Just like there's a male side of Yesod, there's a female side of Yesod. So it's a very interesting thing that when people talk about, this prayer, when they look at Lachad Odi, that they're actually reenacting this kind of concept of Yichud, of God's unity with us through Shabbat. That Shabbat is literally like our marriage with God. It's a point in time where every week we have a union, a divine reunion with God. So it's a very interesting depiction of God in the feminine, and um, it's quite powerful. Um, yeah, it's it's also, by the way, a very, when we I mentioned about, and again, I didn't know I was going to talk about the more messianic elements to this. There's a very important understanding that the Shabbat brings redemption on a weekly basis, but it actually helps bring about complete redemption, where the redemption of the entire world comes forward. Because there's an acknowledgement that right now, and again, when this prayer was written, literally like 50 years after the destruction of Spanish Jewry, the exile from Spain, the destruction of this wonderful Jewish community, there was still a lot of pain, right? Um, and it says, it says, uh, shake off the dusk, right? Come forth from the ruins. You've dealt in a vale of tears, right? But you're going to come forward. Don't be downcast anymore. Don't be sad, because you will become redeemed through this. And one of the lines we don't do is this line right here. Through the advent of the descendant of Peretz, we shall rejoice and exalt. That is the Messiah. Peretz is the descendant of Judah, who is the son of Judah, who the Messiah is a descendant of. I mean, the reason why they use Peretz and not Judah is because it rhymed with in that line. But that whole concept of redemption, I mean, it says right here too. I mean, here it says through the son of Jesse the Bethlehemite. That's David, right? So this is full of not just, you know, union and male and female coming together, but this is also a reminder that there's something bigger at stake here, which is that we can possibly um, bring about the redemption of the world with Shabbat. And that's not a Kabbalistic or Hasidic teaching. That goes back very early in Judaism to the fact that, again, we believe that Shabbat is like a foretaste of the Messianic era. If we can get Shabbat right in our homes and really, kind of like elevate ourselves on Shabbat, we really feel that divine energy, and we really make Shabbat like, oh, this is what life would be like in the world to come. Like, we don't work, we don't have obligations, we're not buying stuff, we're not like soaked up in consumerism. We just enjoy, we just have fun, we just love. We that's what like the messianic era is. The time of redemption is just joy. And that's what Shabbat is supposed to be. So yeah, it's a heavy idea. And so as much as like we think about Lachadodi being kind of like the Kabbalah Shabbat song, it is really also Kabbalah text. Kabbalah Shabbat and Kabbalah are not necessarily connected in the sense they both have the word Kabbalah there, which means to receive, to take in. But Kabbalah Shabbat is to take in Shabbat. Kabbalah is to take in wisdom. But it kind of weirdly kind of comes together with that prayer. And again, Kabbalah Shabbat existed before there was Lachadodi added to it. There were the Zemirot, there were the Shabbat songs that we did, the Psalms that we sang. But really, again, Lachadodi became like the focus, not just for our synagogue, obviously always does Lachadodi, but almost every synagogue does Lachadodi on Shabbat. Any questions? That is one of the most Kabbalistic prayers that we have, and it was written by those people who were steeped in Kabbalah.
There
Rabbi,
is a, sorry.
oh,
I
Yeah,
was just going to say
I was
there
just
was.
this is where people are dancing when they're not moving out of the way of each other. Esther, go first, Esther.
No, just saying if there's a service on a Friday night and a Saturday morning, do they sing Lachadodi both times?
No, because Kabbalah Shabbat, interesting. It's a great question. Kabbalah Shabbat really refers to bringing in the Shabbat. So receiving the Shabbat is bringing it in.
Okay.
And Lachadodi is really bringing it in. It's accompanying Shabbat. So when it was first done, it was done outside. When it was first written and first sung, it wasn't even done in the synagogue. It was done by people as they were walking to their homes, either from synagogue or, walking to synagogue, and they wanted to sing the song as they were imagining Shabbat was with them in a bridal procession. Because we always do a bridal procession. I mean, we even today when we do a procession with the bride and the groom and those people are doing a procession. But in the old days, like the bride and groom were walked into the wedding by everybody. It's kind of you see that a little bit in Fiddler on the Roof, by the way, is that everybody's walks to the wedding together, to the where the chuppah is. So walking Shabbat in, this is the Lachadodi. This is walking it in. The reason we open the door to face the door is to remind ourselves that this prayer is really for bringing in Shabbat into our midst, But if we were walking with her, we would sing it as we walk. So sometimes when we're in Israel and we have a chance to go to the Kotel, we'll sing L'Chadodi. I'll sing a couple bars of it because that is walking with Shabbat to the Kotel, which is like if you want to be at a place where Shabbat is, you feel that energy. If everybody is on the same page, that's where you go, right? That's the place. You know, you can do Shabbat in Israel in lots of places, but you're never going to feel it as you will in the Kotel. That's what we always spend a few minutes. Always, even if we take the bus down there and we just give people 5 or 10 minutes to be at the Kotel at Shabbat, it's something you have to experience. You have to feel it. I think again to understand that like prayers were also part of our bodies and we did things with them, like we bow today and we definitely do that, but there was a point in time when you see Hasidic Jews that are davening with their full bodies, it's because our bodies are really supposed to be engaged in prayer. So even again, if we really focus on it, I don't want people to, one of the reasons why I don't talk a lot about the bowing and that kind of stuff is I don't want people to think if I didn't bow right, I didn't do the prayer right. That's not the point. You're supposed to have the energy carry you with it. And it's supposed to be not like, oh, I didn't bow in the right place. It's really about feeling the energy and having it course through your body, not holding it back. And so that's why some of the Hasidism, some of the Hasidic movements, and we've seen them at the wall. They're not always there. I always want them to be there, but they're not necessarily there when I'm there. Are the Karliner Hasidim? The Karliner literally jump out like as high as they can when they're celebrating Shabbat. They literally will, and not just Shabbat, but when they pray, they will jump around while they're praying because they believe that the body is an important part of prayer that our body actually needs to do that. So actually, let me show you if I can show you some Carlin. I don't know if people um, I don't know if people you're not really supposed to. I don't know if you're really supposed to show some of the dancing. Hold it one second. If I can find it, I'll send it. But yeah, they will jump around and also by the way, Breslovers will also the Breslov Hasidim will also jump around in prayer because again, it's supposed to go through your body. So let me just see if I can show.
And men and women or just men?
No, just men. these are these are these are these are men. But again, that's why when you'd see
Feminine care should be more than mask discomfort. It should support your confidence every day. Lactomedi focuses.
No, this is just. But when you see Hasidic Jews dancing at a wedding with such energy, they believe that dancing is really part of, joy becomes a way of praying. And so, I was just thinking about it this last week because we had Dr. King observances, and when we as Jews talk about Dr. King, we oftentimes talk about Rabbi Heschel, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who is his one of his great friends and one of the advocates for King's movement and within the Jewish community. He was a teacher at Jewish Theological Seminary, and what he said when he was in the March of Selma, some of you know this line. He said when we were there in the march, we were praying with our feet. Now, everyone said, "Oh, wow, that's really powerful that he said he was praying with his feet because, it shows you that you don't have to just say prayers, you can actually pray with your body." But Rabbi Heschel was from a Hasidic background. He taught at JTS, but he grew up as a Hasidic Jew in Eastern Europe. Those were his teachers. That was his family. His family were actually Hasidic Rebbes, very well known. Heschel's family were very well known, and most of his family was murdered during the Holocaust. But when he's talking about praying with his feet, that's not just, hey, I'm marching and I'm praying with that I'm doing this kind of like wonderful thing with Dr. King. He's actually sharing a little bit of the Hasidic teaching about the fact that your body also goes with your soul and your mind, and in prayer, and you should completely get absorbed with it, and you should have that energy. And it is the when we talked about Hasidism and we talked about, I shared with you, one of the beautiful teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. I'll just show you again because it's a wonderful teaching. But again, it shows you what the Hasidic movement was doing and how they were kind of teaching this as I said, a somewhat subversive message, which is you don't just need to study and you don't just need to pray in a traditional way. This is the story of the flute, right? This is the Baal Shem Tov story that we shared as far as stories. When we talked about Jewish literature, Jewish stories, the story of the flute, if you recall, was that they were in synagogue. The Baal Shem Tov was in synagogue, and the people were praying on Yom Kippur. And this father takes his son, who, we would say today was developmentally disabled, takes him to the shul for Yom Kippur, and the kid wants to play his flute during the service, and the dad keeps saying, "Don't do that. Don't take it out." And finally, at a certain point, the kid takes out the flute and he starts playing it. Just makes a sound, and everyone stops. And the story says all the worshipers were astonished that the Baal Shem Tov immediately shortened the prayers, which was unusual. Afterwards, the Baal Shem Tov said to the congregation, "Through the sound of this flute, the boy raised all the prayers to heaven and relieved me of my duty." You see, the boy is incapable of uttering a word of prayer. And when he saw the congregation in prayer, a holy spark was lit inside him and his soul burned with passion. Another person could have recited the words of prayers to God with their burning passion, but this boy is unable to pray and quench the holy thirst or the fiery passion that burns within him to the depths of his soul. And so by playing his flute at the moment of his truth in his heart, without any intruding thoughts, he was blessed with pure thoughts of God. And don't we say, Rachamna Lebai Baye, God demands that you be true to your heart. So that's what he said, is that flute opened up. Now, again, this is a very Kabbalistic teaching, right? Now that you know the Kabbalah, you understand when he's talking about those sparks, those are the sparks that we have within us, those clay, those holy sparks. Look, this is so pervasive. These Kabbalistic teachings are so pervasive that, again, sometimes we don't notice them because they're everywhere, and there's so much there that we don't even bother pointing them out, because we look at them and we say, "Oh yeah, that's just the story." But it's not, because there's a piece of this that's very Kabbalistic. That's basically saying, like I told you, every person has something to do in this world that only they can do. That kid could only play the flute, and by doing that, he elevated everybody. So this is this wonderful teaching that we have, that all of us have this energy. Now, here's the other side. The one problem that I sometimes have, I don't hear it all the time, but when I hear it, I know, let's hope it's going to be okay, is that sometimes within the more observant circles, and definitely happens within some Hasidic Jews, they believe that only that everybody has a spark. Every human being has sparks, but only Jews have what's called a pintel yid, which is a Jewish spark. And this is a problem to me because it sounds a little bit chauvinistic. And so when I hear the word pintel yid, I understand they're talking about the spark, this energy, this Jewish light, if you will. But you got to be really careful, because the assumption that other people don't have this light or have less light sounds remarkably chauvinistic. So I'm careful. It's one of the reasons why I have an issue with some forms of Judaism that are more exclusionary and are really not open to the same way to people who are not Jewish. And so on one hand, we talked about today the fact that we have the Kabbalah Center, which, like, there's nothing inherently that you have to do Jewish to be a part of it, to, some forms of Hasidism, which basically say, if you're not Jewish, don't even bother. And so I really there's got to be a middle ground, and I definitely inhabit that middle ground of like everybody has the spark, and it's our job to help them understand that. And if they do it within a Jewish framework, fantastic. But whatever framework they can do it in, they can do it, and everyone's capable of this. And that's why, again, I'm not saying Hasidic Jews are saying that people who aren't Jewish are going to hell. That's a big difference. But to say that somebody who's Jewish has a divine spark that that person doesn't quite have, that I do have a problem with still. So it is, it's very, I want to be very careful. That doesn't mean that everyone who's Hasidic looks down on Gentiles. But it is easier to look down on people if you believe you have extra energy that they don't have inherently because you were born Jewish. Does that make sense? Because I want to be very careful that I don't overstate the issue and tell you something that is not the case. But again, Judaism sometimes does seem a little exclusionary or chauvinistic when you go back to some of those teachings and some of those ideas. Not everybody, again, thinks that doesn't make you think that other people who aren't Jewish are bad. But when I hear that word pintalayid, I know that that could sometimes be problematic. It's all I can say about that without, again, I don't want to say that somebody who's Hasidic looks down on Gentiles. That's not the case. There sometimes does have an effect that it will be it's natural to have that effect. So that's it. It bugs me. It bothers me when I hear that and when people say that. But it also, again, kind of explains why, like, if somebody who's from Chabad comes up to you and says, "Are you Jewish?" and then gives you tefillin, if you're not Jewish, they're not going to put tefillin on you because you don't need it. It doesn't help you at all. It's not going to ignite your spark because you don't have that spark. So I would say, but it doesn't hurt. It's not going to hurt anybody to put tefillin on. But yeah. That's why they ask you first whether you're Jewish before they give you the tefillin. Anybody? But they also believe that if you do tefillin and you're Jewish, you're elevating the sparks just by you doing it. Any questions?
And if you put tefillin on and you're not Jewish, it does nothing?
Does nothing. Nothing.
So how does this reconcile with people that convert?
Interesting. Good question, Mary. I was wondering if somebody would say this. Well, it means that they were always carrying the Jewish spark somehow. So when somebody who is either not born Jewish or somebody gets very into Judaism after they haven't, I don't know what happens to Bob Dylan because he was born Jewish, then became Christian for a while, and then he went back to and he went back to Chabad, by the way. He didn't just go back to Judaism. He went on the Chabad telethon. I'm not sure what happens with his spark, but I'll leave that to them to decide. They'd say he always had the spark and it's always going. But they will also tell you that if somebody converts, they had that spark. It's not like they got that spark. But they'll also say you had it all along. For whatever reason, you were born with that spark, and that spark drove you to Judaism, brought you to that moment because you always had it. And now we're feeding that energy, and that spark is now glowing within you because you're now Jewish and you're doing the mitzvot and you're doing everything that's going to make that spark grow and be part of that energy, be part of that connective energy. So they do believe that, like, if you convert, you always had that spark. It's not like the pilot light was out and you had the spark. It was just really low and you didn't really know what to do with it. So people do convert in Chabad Hasidism. Not often. They definitely aren't out there encouraging people to do it all the time, which kind of wish they would, but they also don't believe that you need to. And they also don't believe that you're going to hell if you don't have that spark. They also don't believe that you're bad if you don't have that spark. I would, on the contrary, say, yeah, but you don't have a spark. Don't you want that person to have a spark? So it's a little problematic. I'm not going to lie. I have a problem with it. But I also know that it's not to the extreme where they believe that everyone who doesn't have that spark, because you don't have that spark, you're not going to heaven. They don't teach that. 100% that's not taught. but there is kind of an implication, there is kind of an inherent hierarchy, if you will, and that I do have a problem with. So I would say everybody has that spark, and what you obviously are doing when you're doing mitzvot and when you're enhancing your life through some of these teachings, that this is happening. Now, again, I told you last week, this is the kind of idea that also was part of Gnostic dualism, was part of some of the stuff that Christianity taught. It is the basis for one of I told you about the Shakers, that they kind of were came out of the Quakers,
Right.
right?
Yeah, the testament of
Yeah, of Anna Lee,
Anna Lee.
Anna Lee. Um, it was. I will tell you that one of the one of the one of the songs that, if you will, of modern day Quakerism, even though it wasn't written by Quakers, is a very Kabbalistic idea along those lines, but it's not. It did not come from Kabbalah. Is one of the Quakers' biggest songs, and I'll play a couple bars of it because you know it very well and you've heard it, and it's going to be very obvious to you when when I share it with you, uh, where it comes from.
You saying Quaker or Shaker?
Quaker. So you all know that song. So that is not was not originally a Quaker song. I don't want to say it was, but it's become one of the songs that they're kind of like is in the fabric of Quaker prayer. So it's a really cool thing that people did you all hear it? I mean, it was playing? Did you hear it?
Yep. Hmm.
Okay, so sometimes I'm not sure whether I enabled the audio enough. So yeah, but there's a Jewish, the Jewish idea for that, the Pentala, is something that I think is important for you to know, and it's important for you to nurture. It's definitely a wonderful image. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to kind of make sense of the energy that we have and the energy that we know we have. We feel it sometimes, and sometimes we don't. But obviously, we're supposed to feel it. And I'm going to finish tonight as we finish Kabbalah. I'm going to finish with I'm going to share one last thing, which I think is appropriate as we go off into the sunset, go off into the evening. Go off
Rabbi,
to sleep.
before you finish, I
Yeah,
have a
sorry.
question.
Yeah,
How did sorry, I
yeah,
can't mute both things, so bear with me.
yeah.
How did Lachado D, since it's Kabbalistic, become a systemic prayer?
Yeah, it's a good question. So how do prayers become part of our consciousness? I think one of the things about it is that it's beautiful. It's beautiful language. It's beautiful. It's got a beautiful. Uh, it's the lyrics are beautiful and they're really well balanced as poetry, and they lend themselves beautifully to music. It's like Adon Olam. You can sing anything to it. Lachado Dia is one of those songs that, because of the meter, and I don't know enough about music to explain it, but it lends itself to wonderful melodies. And so I think to some extent the lyrics themselves are very powerful. And even for people who weren't very Kabbalistic, the idea of greeting Shabbat was articulated so well there. But I also think that the melodies became so great and so powerful that people that like they love the melody. So even if they didn't care that much about if the imagery, and again, I said this at the very beginning, for a long time, Kabbalistic ideas were frowned upon in more rational forms of Judaism until I apologize because I didn't spend as much time. I had mentioned to Esther that I was going to talk a little about Lawrence Kushner today. When we had people in the 60s, and I will say this now about them, in the 60s and 70s, when we had people that were definitely influenced by New Age theology and practices and what was going on in the world around them, with some of the forms of Hinduism and Buddhism that were kind of infiltrating um, uh, our culture, infiltrating sounds bad, but it was, it was part of our culture. The Beatles went to India and brought back the sitar and brought back, I mean, George Harrison, essentially became Hare Krishna. So it had an effect, the Eastern philosophies, and people were saying, hey, doesn't Judaism have some of that too? And so you had rabbis like Lawrence Kushner that started writing poetry and started creating meditative practices that allowed for Kabbalistic imagery to kind of reincorporate. So I will say that there are some really good books about Kabbalah. I mentioned this one last week. Somebody asked me about it. Kabbalah for Dummies is actually a great book written by Arthur Kurzweil, which covers a lot of the history, but also a lot of the really important ideas from Kabbalah. So this is a really good book. And as much as this Zohar will do nothing for you because it's literally just a book in Aramaic, and unless your Aramaic got really good in the last couple of months, this isn't going to help you. I wish my Aramaic was good enough. There is a wonderful translation of the Zohar, and this is a perfect example. If you want to study the Zohar, and it's got a lot of commentary and it's got a lot of stuff, this is a book by Daniel Matt, and it's not a book, it's 7 volumes. So it's not cheap. It's the Pritzker edition because someone in the Pritzker family sponsored this creation of this book, this edition. This is a wonderful, and Daniel Matt, I'm going to post some of the links to his videos, his discussions. He's a wonderful professor, a rabbi and professor of Kabbalah. And he wrote a really good book, 1-volume book, much easier reading than the Zohar, which is called God and the Big Bang. And this is a book where, again, discovering the harmony between science and spirituality. And so he talks about Kabbalistic ideas, and he, I think, provides a wonderful idea of how we can balance what science teaches us. And again, science doesn't have definitive answers yet, by the way, about the origin of the cosmos, the destiny of the cosmos. Just so you know, there's a lot of different feelings about that. And you probably know that if you study any cosmology at all, listen to Carl Sagan or some of those things. There's a lot of this is still theoretical. But the idea of there being a Big Bang, a beginning, this is a great reflection on that. So this is Danny Matt. And so those are some good books.
We can't see it, Rabbi.
Sorry, this is one of the really good ones too. A 1-volume, easy to read, practical book, if you will, about Kabbalah. But Lawrence Kushner wrote several books of poetry and readings based on Kabbalistic teachings from a non-Orthodox perspective, because he worked at Reformed congregations. And taught in Massachusetts for many years as a rabbi, and so he was teaching Kabbalistic ideas to predominantly communities that didn't speak Hebrew regularly and didn't study a lot of the other texts. And so he was one of the really important writers for people who come from a non-Orthodox world. One of the important writers, and he's a little bit less accessible, but he's not completely inaccessible, but he was writing from an Orthodox standpoint. It was a rabbi named Aryeh Kaplan. And Aryeh Kaplan did not live, unfortunately. He died very young, but he wrote some wonderful books. Aryeh Kaplan's books, I'm going to post some of the titles. He wrote several books that incorporated Kabbalistic teachings, but again, he was really teaching and working with a more Orthodox community. But he was one of the great kind of like popularizers of Kabbalistic teachings and meditative practices that existed in traditional Judaism. Again, this really came out of the 60s and 70s. So I'm not saying that I'm not 100% sure if every Reformed synagogue in the 50s had abandoned, let's say, said, well, we're not doing Lecha Dodi. It doesn't really fit into what we're doing tonight. But I don't know if they read it in English. I don't know I can't say for sure. But I do know that a lot of Kabbalistic practices had kind of been looked down on because they were seen to be little too witchcraft, little too much like magic. And that is what I was going to share with you here, which is and again, Martha, I hope I answered your question about the Jewish spark and Jewish chosenness. But yeah, that is part of the issue of how it manifests itself is in teachings like that. But here, before we go to bed, and I did it, I ended up being able to do this in 90 minutes. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. I didn't know for sure, but I was able to get this through. Apologies, because again, were 3 classes enough to do all this? I don't know. I just felt like the journey would take us through these classes, through 3 of them. And as I said, if you missed any of them, they're all posted. Well, they'll all be posted up on our Jewish Journey page, because we do have a page of Jewish Journey on our Temple Beth Ami homepage. But all of these classes are always up on our YouTube channel. Next week we're also gonna be online, and we're gonna be looking. We're gonna start looking at kind of and it's gonna be a multi classes. We're gonna be looking at Jewish history, and kind of putting together where all these things were happening, because I think we need to kind of step back into like a timeline and to kind of look at where we are in history, where all this stuff goes, where Lurianic Kabbalah goes, where the Talmud goes, where the Torah goes, and to kind of go through a Jewish history overview. So we're going to step kind of out of the text a little bit and into like where do these texts come from and where do they fit on a timeline. But tonight we finish with this bedtime Shema. So this is only started appearing after the 1600s, after Lurianic Kabbalah, which also, as we talked about, had a lot of references to energy, both in astrology, in numerology, in gematria, which is numerology, and also in angelology. And so references and invocations of angels became a little bit more prevalent because they were seen as also fitting into the Kabbalistic structures. So that angels would be identified with certain forces on the map, on the Sphira. Associated with Tiferet, associated with Binah are these certain angels, especially the archangels, the angels that are in some cases mentioned in the Bible, right? Because we do have Michael mentioned in the book of Daniel, but we have these angels which are like God's attendant angels. And so just like we have bedtime lullabies, which talk about angels, we had a bedtime Shema. But many of our great grandparents and maybe even our grandparents would say, before they say the Shema, they would say this invocation before they went to sleep, before they said the Shema. In the name of Adonai, God of Israel, B'Shem Adonai Elohei Yisrael, on my right, Mimeni Michael, on my left, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, and above my head, the Shekhinah. So this idea that when you went to sleep, you were protected by angels, which are on your sides. And remember, the map of the Sphira also corresponds to the map on the human body, right? We have a Sphira map on our bodies. And so when we think about those Sphirot, they are points of energy and points of connection to the angels. And so the angels are literally kind of taking care of us as we sleep and as we and as we're in the dream state, which is where we kind of ascend. We can ascend to these levels easier when we sleep, when we're no longer bothered by the day and the world around us. So again, this is the body. You have the angels that correspond to, and again, there only were 4 and the Shekhinah mentioned, but again, these sides of us, right and left side, front and back, and then again above us, these points on our body would correspond to where the angels are guarding us, and not only guarding us, but again, kind of creating that dimensional connection between ourselves and God at night, because at night we really do get to feel that sometimes that stuff, we just are doing it when we shut off our mind. When our brain is shut off, then we can be on that level of Atzilut where we feel that energy, where we're connected nonstop with God. But we actually feel it more in our sleep. And so in our sleep, we're drifting back and forth between those levels. And again, sometimes we feel it a little bit more when we sleep. And I hope with that, that when you go to sleep tonight, that you're surrounded by angels, that you're surrounded by protection, that you wake up and feel that energy, and maybe are a little bit more in tune with the highest levels, or at least however we find ourselves praying, or whatever we're doing, that we have we're not just only in the Asiya realm, where we're only in physical reality, that we actually get to go up a little bit higher. And it's not always, it's not very hard, when we pray, when we're feeling our higher levels of our consciousness, meditating, that we're actually transcending, and also kind of in that other level. So, and of course, when we study Torah, we're also doing that as well. So we do that. We do that with our body, but also with where we really feel this, but also with our emotions and with our soul and our spirit. So, thank you, everybody. I hope again you found some of this practical, and it was not meant to be too esoteric or too inaccessible. I tried to make it as understandable as possible, which is very hard. Um, these are the hardest classes for me to teach, are the ones on Kabbalah, because I always wonder if I'm veering off into, sounding not only like he's talking about stuff that, you know, I I, I don't want to say like impractical, or new, that it's new age BS. It's not. This is stuff that, if it's done with intention, and it's done with kavanah, with our spirit, with our mind and our body, that it really does help us. And again, it's not magic. It's not supposed to be about red ribbons and that kind of stuff. But hey, if a red ribbon helps remind you that there's other levels, and there's other levels of existence happening, not just the one that we see, and not the one that we like get grounded into, more power to you. But I also don't want to see people get taken advantage of. So with that, have a wonderful night, and have a wonderful sleep, and hopefully again feel that energy. And we'll see you in the coming days. We will be online Tuesday and Wednesday next week as well. The week after we'll be back in person, but Tuesday and Wednesday next week we'll be online too. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Wonderful to see
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Bye,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Bye bye.